ridiculous.
Well, here's the thing.
Maybe. Sometimes.
Tell me about this. I want to know more.
Oh, yeah. No.
Holy cow.
We've had a lot of fun.
So today's request for something I need at school that I don't have was for sort of old clothes that can be worn in the pool because my daughter is in the swimming portion of the year for her PE class, and I guess they have to wear... I was like, is it like the last day and they want to just like celebrate by jumping in the pool for some weird reason with their clothes on? But no, it's because they have to learn how to swim with clothes on, you know, in case they drown.
Wow.
So
that's a good skill.
Yeah.
Really?
So now,
do you remember ever doing that when you were a kid?
We never even we didn't have a swimming pool in my high school at the time, so we didn't have swimming lessons.
We had an outdoor pool and we had lessons. It was part of our PE rotation, but I don't remember ever having to get in the pool with clothes on.
Yeah.
I remember taking a class, I'm not sure if it was high school related or not, but we had to go, they put canoes in the pools.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it shows how Canadian we are, right?
Yeah.
And we had to tip the canoe and learn how to get back in the canoe.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Can't remember if that was high school related or not. Maybe
Fancy
it was just
or
stuff
summer
y'all
camp. I feel like I've seen that or heard of that at camp.
We just had to get from one end of the pool to the other, and that was hard enough.
Never mind getting in and out of a canoe.
I have a swimming style that can roughly be described as flailing. It gets me across, darn it.
Right.
And I'm really not drowning.
You mean you were raised in California
I was.
and you don't know how to swim in a pool?
I think we've established on this before that I was not a good fit for California. No, I can swim across the pool. Mm-hmm. It's just not pretty.
It's just you're not going to
get
points
locomote myself through the water.
Are you like my mother who wears her glasses and keeps her head above the water?
No, but my mother did that because she would have, she would go get her hair done every week and there would be like 1.5 inches of hairspray on it. And she could swim and keep that out of the pool, keep her whole head and do like the kind of doggy paddle.
That's
mine is a full body flailing sort of style. If it's a version of the crawl that could be called the flail, just because it's it ain't pretty.
Because there's arms and legs everywhere, not necessarily in a coordinated effort.
That is correct. And in between, gasping for breath. So I have all the steps. They just not.
They don't come
done
together.
In a coordinated and graceful manner. I see people swimming in the Olympics going, "Are we the same species?" I'm not entirely sure.
Right.
Wow. Well, I honestly can say I've never had that request, Catherine.
Yeah, I mean,
clothes.
That is bizarre.
Lunch and instruments, homework, books, that's all obvious, but yeah.
They're going to carry home these wet clothes?
I guess. I mean,
that seems all kinds of impractical.
The nice thing for her is that she has it as her very last class of the day. So she, pretty much just goes home as soon as she's done.
But what's the weather like? Is it like walk home in wet clothes weather right now in Wisconsin?
It's not too bad. It was very cold the last couple days, but it's better now. And the pool is indoor at least.
Yeah.
We don't have to deal with that.
Wow.
So
yes. That sounds just incredibly weird.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
I've never been asked
I think it's funny that my first response was like, "Oh, is it because they're like celebrating it's the last day of swimming?"
So you're going to throw people into the pool?
Which is really kind of a dumb...
It's like we're all going to spontaneously jump in to the pool in our clothes, but first we're going to get old clothes from
right.
home.
That's what I was thinking.
Sort of remove some of the
I was not thinking
gala aspect.
I was not thinking let's learn how to survive drowning. But drowning kind of comes in with our topic later. So I will go ahead and get us started.
Let us transition.
And I will say hello and welcome to Parenting Roundabout, a weekly podcast about the things that parents are talking about, obsessing about, and complaining about right now. I'm Catherine Haleko, and I'll be making a trip to the high school in a little while. With me today are Nicole Erdix.
Hello.
And Terri Morrow.
Hello, everybody.
Today on the podcast, we're going to talk about kids and cousins on our Friday speed round, shout out some stuff we like on the Roundabout Roundup, and do some shameless self-promotion.
We're going to promote our shelves.
Our shelves and
Very
our
nice
shelves. But first, before we get to all that promotion, we wanted to discuss how are you in a crisis?
Oh boy, crisis. You know, you don't want to say you're good in a crisis because that seems to be inviting one. But there is something about a crisis that just removes all the other options and distractions and gives you one big meaty thing to deal with that is useful. Mm-hmm. It's good for focus, you know? If you're the sort of person like me who is always doing 500 different things at once and not doing any of them really all that well, losing all of that and having one thing to focus on is clarifying. But I don't know how. I mean, I think I do pretty well in a crisis and then I fall apart afterwards. But how about you guys? Nicole, you've recently had a crisis there in your family, right?
Yeah.
Tell us how you did.
Yeah.
Were you calm and cool and collected, or were you
pretty significant?
Upset?
Overall, I think I was relatively calm and just in a very I've got to get this done state of mind. Backstory is that on this past Friday night, I got the phone call from my young adult son telling me that he had been in a car accident.
Oh, cats.
And of course, I knew it wasn't life-threatening because he was still talking to me on the phone. Yeah. So that was a good thing. So my initial response was, what did you do wrong? Who did you hit? Mother of the year, right? Yeah. But see, the week before that, he had actually been in a little fender bender, and it was his fault. Wow. Yeah. So it was just a tiny little thing. But so then I was kind of exasperated. I was like, oh, what did you do now? And he said, no, Mom, it wasn't, I got hit. I was the one that was hit. And so I was in the middle of waiting for my daughter who was in a tennis lesson. So she was on the court. Mm-hmm. So once I established that he was still alive and breathing, my son, and that he at that time felt he had only a broken nose.
Oh, gee, only.
He told me where he was located, and I could also hear the sirens in the background, which was a little stressful. Yeah. Because he said that the firefighters and the police were starting to arrive. So I knew it was more of a big deal than just a little fender bender.
Yeah.
So I think I just went into kind of action mode. So I went and I got my daughter off the court. Uh-huh. We drove over and found the accident site, which was about 10 minutes away. And then I had to find parking. They had blocked off the intersection, so I had to kind of get as close as I could to park and then walk over. So I just really kind of dealt with my son and getting the tow truck. So I focused on two things. And thankfully my son's girlfriend had arrived as well. So she was taking photos of the site. And then, so there was a driver who was pulling out of a parking lot and she decided to turn left across 3 lanes of traffic.
Oh my gosh.
However, my son, who was in the farthest lane away from her, was blocked by a big tour bus. So she couldn't see the 3rd lane.
Oh dear.
The lane furthest from her. So she just pulled out.
Oh, sure.
So my son, didn't even have time to brake. He just basically drove into her.
Oh my gosh.
And I must say though, remember a couple weeks ago, I did give a shout out to Toyota Corollas. Yeah. Let me tell you, that car was amazing. The airbags that deployed in that car. Yeah. Were phenomenal. And he, like I said, so far, we've only discovered that he's broken his nose, and that was likely from the airbag coming out. So, but it just kind of enveloped him and protected him.
Wow.
But I don't know if you've seen the photos online, but the whole front end is just
that
completely
is scary.
toast. So so I think in that situation, it was just very much, okay, what do we need to do? What do we need to get done? What do we need to take care of? And then I was also able to allocate too, you do this, you do that, you do this, let's do that. So I was just going through this checklist in my head, right? Get photos, get witnesses, make sure the bleeding stopped on him. Like, it was just kind of like this checklist of stuff. And I don't know, like, when I was 16 and 17 and 18, I lifeguarded for several years. So I wonder if that kind of training
maybe,
came into play, because I was just going through this checklist of crisis management.
And then later, did it hit you, and did you feel hysterical?
I didn't get hysterical, but later in the evening when everything was done and said, I just had a few tears, but only because it could have been much worse than what it was. And that's just made me realize, okay, that was kind of serious. So,
wow. That's what I sit waiting for that phone call every time anybody in my family is out of the house. Wow. That's why I follow them on GPS, just to make sure they're getting where they're going. Yes, they're there. Because that's scary.
Yeah, so that was my most recent experience, and memorable so far.
Yeah. And you felt like you were good in that crisis, huh?
Adequate. I wouldn't say good.
It sounds like you did a good job.
It sounds like you did. I don't know if I would have thought in terms of getting the witnesses and getting all that stuff. I think I would have just been freaking out a little bit.
I think if it was just me there, it might have been a bit different, because I might have been a bit more frazzled. But because I had like my son's girlfriend and my daughter was there.
Right. You have to kind of model.
Well, I was just more like, okay, well, this needs to get done, so why don't you do that? And that needs to get done, so why don't you do that? So, so I had my daughter on the phone with my husband and giving him updates, and my son was on the phone with the insurance, and his girlfriend was taking the photos, and then I was talking to the police officer. So we were kind of I guess maybe I'm good at managing people.
There you go. That sounds good.
Crisis management.
That's a good skill, I think.
Yeah.
Not necessarily a first responder, but definitely crisis management.
That's good. I feel like I often am like a response team of one. I just have to manage myself. But I do order people around in that situation, I guess. Catherine, how about you? Have you had a crisis to rise to or not?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think. I was thinking about when my daughter had appendicitis, and it took like a full 24 hours for me to actually swing into action, because we just didn't. She just kept complaining that her stomach hurt. And she was throwing up, and so we were just like, well, her stomach hurts because she's throwing up. Like, we weren't thinking that there was anything else going on, and it wasn't until after several hours of trying to help her with various over-the-counter medicines and whatever, finally I was like, I should call the doctor. And it wasn't even, I wasn't even calling the doctor because I was afraid that it was serious. I was calling the doctor because I was like, I don't know what else to do for her. You know, she just feels
You're
awful.
Exasperated.
And I'm not I can't figure out how to help her. And then they were like, well, she needs to be seen within 4 hours. And I'm like, oh
my God.
Okay, I'm not going to wait 4 hours. Why would I do that? So then it was like, where's the nearest hospital? Get in, call a cab. Because we weren't at home. We were traveling. We were in San Francisco.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awful.
So, I mean, the good news was that there was a good, teaching hospital very close by. So, but it's a pretty weird thing to get in a cab at like 4 a.m. with your 6-year-old and go to a strange hospital. And the other thing was that, she, then she was under their care and it was fine. And, but after she was released from that hospital and we came home, she basically relapsed and we had to take her back to the hospital. And that was scary because, she was in pain again and having fever again. And I called our family doctor, and I'll never forget. He said, if it was my kid, I would take her to the emergency room. I'm like, well, you're the doctor. Like, why wouldn't you just say, I think she needs to go into the hospital? I don't know. Yeah. It was like a weird way to phrase it, and it freaked me out. Like, if he would have just said, well, since it's after hours, I think you should take her in.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I remember that I looked out the window and I saw our next door neighbors starting to take a walk, and I ran outside and I said, we have to take Josie to the hospital. Can you come inside? Can you put Owen to bed? Can you take care of our son? So like you said, Nicole, like you quickly assess what needs to happen and who can do it. So
that's right.
So they ran in, and my son was only 3 at the time, and he thought it was the most awesome thing that our neighbor came in and read him a story and put him to bed. He loved that. So yeah. But even still, like when she was back in the hospital the second time, I wasn't as clear probably on how sick she was. But I happened to know, I was friends with the surgeon's wife, and later she told me that he had said, this was a really sick little girl. She was but like you said, I didn't really grasp it as much at the time because I don't think I could have I don't think I could have handled it. I just was like, okay, I'm packing a bag. I'm at the hospital. We're here for a little while, and that's that.
Yeah. So. That moment where you realize it's serious. Yeah. My son had late one night, I think it was a Sunday night, we'd had dinner, and then he said his stomach was bothering him a little bit, but, we figured he ate too much because he always eats huge amounts of food. And we didn't pay attention, and all of a sudden he was like, it hurts, and he was really screaming and yelling about it. So, we put him in the car, and we took him to the emergency room. He walked into the ER and walked up to the front desk and says, it hurts! He starts yelling and screaming there. So they took us in pretty quick, and I'm still like, well, it's probably not. It's hard to tell. He doesn't feel pain really sharply, so if he's complaining, it's probably something. But, we talked to various people, and then they took him into a room in the ER, and then we're going to take him for a scan of his abdomen to see if there was anything. And, I'm still sort of like, gee, I hope, apologize. Yeah, you apologize to people. Right. I'm sorry, it's probably, I don't really know if they brought him back, and about a minute later, somebody came in with like a bag of morphine and hooked him up. And I'm like, okay, apparently there's actually something wrong. I don't think they just give it out to the kid who's complaining for a stomach ache. Mm-hmm. And, he wound up he had a ruptured ulcer and had to go into surgery. And, we wound up staying there overnight as he went through that and everything. And it's that clarifying moment where, okay, now you stop apologizing to people for being here. Apparently something is actually wrong. But we also have some friends we count on to come over and take care of the other kid when one kid is having a crisis. Mm-hmm. And in our case, they live like 40 minutes away. Oh. So it's like I had to call my friend at like 2 a.m. and say, you know what, get out of bed, go to my house so that you can stay with Lena and my husband can come be here with me while he's going through this surgery. And that was, I felt pretty cool and calm while it was all going on. Mm-hmm. But when I think about it now, I freak out a little bit. Because it could they come and they tell you about the surgery and all the things that can go wrong. And it's scary. You can't think about them at the moment because you have to say, yes, of course, do the surgery. And I will be here waiting. You can't do that. I'm sure it's the same with you, Nicole. You can't think of all the possibilities that could have happened until after everything is squared away and it's clear that none of them are going to happen. And then you go, oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, you can't. You don't have time to think of the possibilities.
Yeah.
You don't have time, and it's a self-defense mechanism.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
If you did, you would
just have to
be paralyzed.
That's true.
Yeah, I think that's why sometimes when it's not a crisis, when it's just a possibility and you're researching everything and you're worrying about every little thing because you have the time and the luxury to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But when it actually happens, you just have to say, well, of course,
Yeah.
Do what you have to do. Give them whatever medication you have to give them. We need to get through this crisis.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, I have to, when you're talking about being on vacation and having something like that, Catherine, I remember, I think I've talked to her about a visit we made to Orlando when the kids were little, and one thing that happened is my son almost drowned in the pool. And another thing that happened early in the trip is that he had taken a bath and we were trying to towel him off, and he pulled away from us and he hit his eye on the side of the tub. This is why the security people at this resort loved us so much. So we had to take him to the emergency room. It was really bleeding and it was like split open. And we wound up sitting at this ER for so long waiting for a doctor to see him that it closed up on its own. Huh. So they didn't have to give him stitches. They didn't have to do anything. But it was so weird being on vacation and being in a hospital.
Yes.
Going to a strange hospital, not being sure if they're going to take your insurance, not what happens if he has to be here for a while. How do we work that out?
Yeah.
So it's really freaky. It's not something you plan on.
Too, because
it's like, hello, lobby? Where's the nearest hospital? Can you send us instructions? How do we get there?
Yeah, and we ended up having to move, because the place that we had actually rented an apartment, and, we had to give it up after a certain amount of time and change the flight information and all that stuff, or change our flights. And we had to find a place to stay because I remember when they were taking her back for the surgery, and I was like, well, how long will she be in the hospital and how long will she be recovering? They're like, 5 or 6 nights.
Right.
I was like, what? Are you kidding me? Like, people go in and have like open heart surgery and go home the next day. But sure enough, she was there for 5 nights.
Must be something maybe with abdominal area surgery, because Andy was in the hospital for like 5 days. I was surprised it was that long because I thought, you hear, people have babies and go home that day. It's like, I thought we didn't do this anymore.
Exactly. Yeah, and so we had to find another hotel, and we found a very strange place in Japantown in San Francisco with like all this painting on the walls and like really Victorian furniture, and
oh wow,
it was very odd. And we were there with our 2 little kids.
Wow, that is so weird. And then you have no support, you have no family to come and help you deal with stuff,
right? And thank goodness my son, who was 3 at the time, was a real champ, because it was we just had to split up, and one parent was in the hospital and one parent was with him the whole time she was there, because there was really, you couldn't keep a 3-year-old in half a hospital room, because we only had half a room, and it was so big and busy. Like, I didn't feel like I could leave her for even a minute, like just to go to the bathroom, because it didn't have a bathroom. And I was like, what? She's 6. Like, I can't just leave her alone in this room,
Yeah. So. We never left him alone in the room, and he was much older than 6, but it's the same, you just feel like somebody, you can't just leave.
No.
You can't just like check out and come back the next morning. How are you, honey?
Right.
People are coming in and out and doing stuff. It's like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah, exactly.
And surprisingly, in the 70s, we were dropped off at the hospital.
I'm sure. And
one of my fonder memories was being left alone at the hospital overnight when I was like 7.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You hear stories about that, about kids living and having PTSD because of it.
Yeah. Seriously.
Yeah, we were lucky in that, even though I think he was 18 or a little over, but they put him in the children's ward because of his disability. So that was really nice, because then I could stay there. I think if he had been in an adult ward, they would have made me go home.
Okay.
It was, I don't want to, I've had my fill of crises. Thank you very much.
Right.
Well done. Do you guys do anything like to prepare for emergencies ahead of time? It's impossible to prepare for emergencies, isn't it? Whatever you prepare for, that will not be the emergency you have.
That won't be the thing that happens. Yeah.
It'll be a completely different emergency. But do you have well, I mean, we know Nicole has an earthquake kit.
I do.
Do you prepare for weather emergencies where you are, Catherine?
Not
Have
real.
you ever had a weather-related crisis?
Not real well. I mean, just with things like, you move your shovel to right by the door, your snow shovel, instead of having it be all the way out in the garage, put it by the front door. So that you can get it and without having to take a long trek through the snow. But yeah, I mean, we're very lucky because we're not at risk for too many scary things. So, we have the basic emergency, the fire extinguisher, the first aid kit, the first aid kit that's in the car, that kind of thing.
Every now and then I think we should get a generator because some people out here do have that. But I've never been that organized to do so. But I think, geez, if we were without power for a long time, which I think in the last really big hurricane here, I think we were without power for a while.
Yeah, like Hurricane Sandy, weren't you?
Yeah. And then Hurricane Irene, we were on vacation, and the resort we were at was without power for 2 or 3 days.
I've heard that, I mean, I don't know if you do this or not, and something that I need to do is just to keep cash on hand, because if there's
That's interesting.
an emergency, all the electronic systems will go down. And that actually happened to us one summer. We were vacationing and there was a fire in the nearby in the community. And we couldn't leave the we couldn't leave the town. And then the power went down and we couldn't buy anything because we didn't have cash.
Oh, yeah.
All we had were our bank cards. And of course, all the ATMs were not working.
That's right. You know what? I think that was a problem when we were on vacation and there was no power in the entire area we were in. I think that was a problem too. I think we had to use cash.
Well, my husband keeps saying, make sure we have cash on hand. Make sure we have a cash on hand. I'm terrible. I never keep cash.
I never do either. It's bad.
Yeah. So that's something I need to. That's an easy thing to do if you think about it. If you remember it.
It is. If you remember it. That is a good way to prepare for a crisis.
Yes.
But you have to put it
stash
somewhere
some gold under your bed.
Put it somewhere where you won't spend it.
That's
or your
right.
Kids. You won't spend it for your, the $10 field trip money that you've got to donate.
I need some money. I need cash.
Yeah.
I'm always making sure my kids have cash in their wallets, but then telling them only use it in a place where you can't use your card. If you can use your card, use your card. But they, I have this money here. I'll just spend that.
Look at that.
How did that get there? I think I'll just spend it.
Anyway, well, I hope we remain crisis-free for the near future.
No kidding.
Yeah, it's impossible to predict, and every time my family leaves, I brace. What are the things? Because I'm my mother's daughter, I think. What are all the terrible things that could happen?
Yes.
And what would I do? I'm always in crisis mode.
Well, it's
in
good
one
to
way or
be
another.
Prepared.
That is how I prepare. Is I just worry every waking moment and run over my procedures of any particular crisis. How would I handle it?
There you go.
Oh, gosh.
Often in a dark room with a washcloth over my head.
Yes, of course.
Well, on to something lighter then.
Yes.
Or I don't know, maybe it's not.
Family. Yeah, maybe not. Speaking of crisis.
Speaking of crisis and worry, this situation with my son took most of our past weekend and the last few days. But prior to that, we were also very busy because we had my cousin's daughter visiting us for 12 days, I think she was here. Wow. And so she is my first cousin's daughter, and she traveled. She came over from Australia for her spring break. So she decided that she wanted to visit my daughter and our family. Cool. And she, did I say she was 14? She's 14 years old. Anyway, so she decided that she wanted to come for a visit. So she spent a year saving up her money, doing chores. Wow. She bought her own ticket, and she got her spending money and hopped on the plane, and she was here for 12 days. So it's been a very hectic month.
Yeah.
But it was a very enjoyable time. And honestly, even though she's my daughter's, I think, third cousin, they have a very, very close relationship, and she's much closer to that cousin than she is to any of her other ones. So I'm just wondering, what kind of relationships do your kids have with their cousins or extended family members, people that may or may not be officially cousins?
Official cousins.
Terri, where are you at on that?
I don't have a lot of cousin experience myself. I had cousins growing up, but we saw them twice a year, like 3 times a year, Christmas, Easter, and Thanksgiving. We would see them. And in between, I really didn't see them at all. I didn't have an experience of growing up with cousins. I had other cousins who I would visit like every other year when we went to see my grandparents in Chicago. And in between, it just wasn't a part of my life. So now, for a while, my kids had cousins who lived in the same town, and that was really fun, and they really spent a lot of time together. And then my brother and sister-in-law moved someplace else, and now we see them at holidays maybe, and sometimes in between, but really not very frequently. So they don't have that relationship with them, and it's, they got used to it a little bit, but now it's not there. And when you're farther apart and you don't know each other as well, it's, the relationship changes. So we're kind of sad about that. We had the experience of closeness, and now it doesn't exist anymore. And, I think there's a little sadness over that, at least on our end. But, what are you going to do? So people move. That happens. So we really don't have that much relationship anymore.
Do you see them? You're saying that you see them about once a year?
Well, more than that. I mean, they're not that far away, but they're far enough away that you can't just pop over. I mean, they used to be across town. So
Right.
it used to be I could, leave my kids there if I needed to go do something, or so there was a lot of back and forth from each other's houses. And for a while, my husband's mother lived here, so they would come here to see their grandparents. And now it's just, you have to organize a visit.
Yeah.
So like we meet halfway for holidays sometimes, and sometimes they will come here for something. I think they still have doctors they see here. So sometimes they'll come to town, and sometimes they'll stop by and stay here. So, maybe 5 or 6 or 7 times during the year we'll see them. We went for Christmas. We all spent the week together at a resort, and that was nice. But sort of just enough to remember what it was like when you used to see them all the time. And then now we're not going to see you for 3 months. So, yeah, I wish there was more. That's something I would really have liked my kids to have. But it hasn't worked out, and I don't have any. My husband, on the other hand, has lots of cousins that he still sees regularly. Well, not that much regularly anymore, but into his adult years, he saw them regularly, and then everybody got married and moved to different parts of New Jersey. So now we see them at weddings and funerals, but I never had that experience. I don't know. What about you guys? Do you have a lot of Catherine, do you have cousins? You have cousins kids have cousins in New Jersey, right?
Yeah, they have one in New Jersey. That's the one who's closest in age. She and my daughter are only about 15 months apart. So for my daughter's, first 2 years, when we lived in New Jersey, they lived in New Jersey, and my mother-in-law lived in Pennsylvania, and we would see each other fairly often. And once in a great while, we would maybe babysit our niece or vice versa, but that was pretty rare. And now, of course, we live far away. My daughter and her cousin are pretty close as they can be for seeing each other, maybe twice a year, and in between they're Instagramming or Snapchatting or whatever. Yeah. So that's kind of nice that they can do that.
Yes.
So, it's a little harder now that my mother-in-law's gone. So we have less opportunity to go back and see her and see them at the same time. So, and then they also have cousins on my side. My older half siblings have a bunch of kids. There's 5 of them, but most of them are much older, so they haven't had much chance to spend time with them. Yeah. I mean, way back when my husband and I talked about, because we both, I grew up with just one cousin who lived right around the corner, so we spent a lot of time together, even though she's much younger than I am. But my husband grew up with all his family within blocks of his house. Everybody was there. And we talked about even having more kids because our kids only had each other as siblings and didn't have, close by cousins. So really that didn't end up working out. But that was, something we talked about. We wished they had a little more family. So one way we were going to try to do that was have another kid. So
social media has made it possible to stay in touch with people even if you're not right there, and it's certainly for kids, but we're running up against something a lot, which is it's hard to read people on social media, and so somebody will say something that maybe hurts your feelings, but then when you see them in person, everything's okay, so it's confusing. Are they, are we still friends? Are we not still friends? Did I offend you or did I not offend you? And it's hard to tell, on if your only contact with somebody for most of the year is on social media.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I grew up with one cousin that was a 5-hour plane ride away. And then the rest of my cousins were in Australia, and I was living in northern Canada. So I only saw them maybe once every 10 years. I was lucky. So, we didn't grow up with any family near us at all. We were very isolated from family, and I really... And I always said, I'm not going to live away from family, and then what do? I moved to California. I'm not living out my goal.
Well, there's pros and cons.
It sure is. Life takes you in places that you don't even imagine, so... unless you're committed to staying in that one location, no matter what, for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And even if you are, that doesn't keep other people from moving away.
That's right.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
So, well.
So this was an upbeat.
Yeah. This whole podcast is really cheerful.
Between accidents and family and...
Yes, it's complicated is the name of this episode.
Let's move on to something more interesting and upbeat. I shouldn't say interesting, but something more upbeat.
So now it's time for our Roundabout Roundup, where we bring you some of the things that we've read or seen or used recently that we wanted to shout out and share with you. And they usually tend to be entertaining or helpful. So
we require them to be entertaining and helpful today.
Yes. So what's yours, Terri?
All right. Well, this is somewhat tied in with cousins because I went to a bridal shower on Saturday that was for the daughter of one of my husband's cousins. And it was basically 4 hours of sitting in a restaurant banquet room, eating and watching this girl open presents. But the food was really good. So I want to shout out Maggiano's. Have you guys been to, do you have that where you are?
No.
I think I've been to one in Chicago.
Okay. Italian food, obviously. They had the best fried zucchini I have ever had. They brought out appetizers, and one of them was these strips of fried zucchini with this really delicious breading, fried enough to be really, really crispy, but not oily or greasy. I could have just had that, and they also brought out a salad. Just keep bringing the zucchini sticks and the salad, and I will be fine. Don't need the eggplant parmesan, don't need the spaghetti. Keep bringing the zucchini. So that was really outstanding. If you ever find yourself in a Maggiano's, I heartily recommend the appetizer. The salad was good too. Appetizers and salad, perfectly respectable dinner. But really all the food was very good. And it was a very pleasant banquet room to be sitting and eating in for 4 hours.
Watching people open presents.
Wowzers. How many people were there for that big of a banquet?
It was pretty big. We were, I don't know, I'm trying to think how many people were at our table. It was a good crowd. I'd say maybe there were 10 people at our table and there were 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 6 tables.
Wow.
and a ton of gifts. They are set up.
Is this like your typical Italian wedding type setup?
Yes.
Okay.
So my sister-in-law was watching this and thinking, I wonder if I could find a guy and just make a legal arrangement that we will get married to get these gifts, and then so I can use some of that stuff. We'll split the loot and then split up.
And then split.
Yeah. Because she got quite a haul. I was thinking they probably needed to hire a truck to bring all the stuff home.
Wow. Really?
Yeah, there was a lot of presents there. I mean, good for her. She's well set up, as I'm sure I was at the time. It's, goes around, comes around. You get the gifts, and then generation later you give the gifts. So
that's right. So Nicole, what's your roundup?
Well, this past weekend, my friend came down to visit me from Canada, and we went shopping at the outlet stores near us. And I discovered a store that I hadn't known about before called the Loft, L-O-F-T.
Oh, I've heard of that.
I don't know why. I had never ventured inside one before, and I'm so upset because I've been missing out all these years. They're exactly the kinds of clothes I like.
Wow. It's associated with a particular brand, right?
Ann Taylor.
Ann Taylor, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And I really like their clothing, and it's respectable, and it's not cheaply made. Like, they're not, they're pretty decent. So
nice.
I was very excited to find that. And from here on in, every Saturday, you'll find me at the outlet store.
If you're looking for Nicole, right?
She's gone shopping.
I'll be at the restaurant eating zucchini strips, and you will be at the store buying classy clothes. Where will you be, Catherine?
I'll be listening to another podcast.
Of course you will be.
We like to recommend podcasts on this podcast quite often. So
yes.
Terri and I listen.
After you're done listening to ours.
Yeah, you can't ditch ours in favor of these other ones. This is very different from what we do. Terri and I both listen to Extra Hot Great, which is a podcast about TV. And they have a really funny spinoff right now called Little House on the Podcast. So it is a 15-minute recap of a Little House on the Prairie episode by Kim Reed, who is a writer and a guest on Extra Hot Great sometimes. And she's just very funny. Like, the one I just listened to, she compared the Olsen family, which are the ones that own the store, and they have the mean daughter Nellie, and she said they're like some kind of Prairie Kardashians. So that
true.
gives you a little bit of an idea of what these are like.
Yes.
And like I said, it's only 15 minutes, so it's just a fun little distraction for 15 minutes, and it just started, so there's only 3 or 4 episodes out right now, and I don't know if she's gonna go do the whole there must be hundreds. I don't know how many episodes of Little House on the Prairie there are.
If I didn't have 20 things in my podcast queue, I would start listening to that right now. I have fallen behind.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't watched that show in years, but it was definitely must-see TV for me when I was a kid, for
me too.
Sure.
Oh, yeah, most definitely.
Well, now that we have shouted out what we like that other people are doing, it is time for our shameless self-promotion, not shelf promotion, but self-promotion. We're going to direct you to some things on our sites that we think you should take a look at. I will start. April is, among many other awareness things that it is Occupational Therapy Month. And as somebody who benefited a lot from picking the brains of occupational therapists during my kids' years in school and years of seeing therapists outside of school, I deeply appreciate the wisdom and ideas that occupational therapists share, and the catalogs that are written for them that I have ordered many, many, many cool things out of. So on the Friendship Circle blog, I have gathered together posts that have been written for the blog by occupational therapists and made a little collection of them for Occupational Therapy Month. So if you go on the site, we will have the link on our show notes, and you can read and pick up some tips of your own. Nicole, what are you self-promoting today?
I was on a Facebook Live video last week.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
Talking about...
You're famous.
Well, I mean, it was exciting, and yeah, I felt... nervous about the whole thing, but I think it turned out well. We talked about how to modify regular classroom assignments so that students with disabilities can complete the assignment as well.
Nice.
So, and that was on, you can actually see the video on my website, theinclusiveclass.com, and you'll hear lots of tips and strategies for modifying classwork.
Cool. All right, we'll have a link to that. And Catherine, what are you self-promoting?
I have another piece up on Reader's Digest, rd.com, and it's about what your daydreams reveal about you.
Oh, my.
So...
reveal that you are lazy and procrastinating is what mine reveal.
They're good. They're generally good. So don't feel bad if you're a daydreamer. Is the basic
check it out.
Basic line.
Wow. Well, I'm going to check that out and see what that has to say about me. And I'm going to do that right after I say goodbye. That's it for this week's episode of Parenting Roundabout. We hope you enjoyed it and that you'll join us every week. You can listen to podcast episodes on parentingroundabout.com or download them from iTunes. Please subscribe so you get all of our podcasts and mini podcasts. You can also follow us on Twitter, where I am at Nicole Erdix, Terri is at Mamatooth, and Catherine is at C. Haleko. You can also follow the podcast on Twitter at Roundabout Chat and look for us on Facebook, Pinterest, Tumblr, YouTube, and Instagram too. Best of all, stop by our podcast page at parentingroundabout.com and read recaps, find links on all the stories we mentioned, and talk back on the comments. Thanks to John Moran for providing our in and out music, and I wish everyone a great week.